Good morning, my name's Graham. I want to make a comment on the problems involving Brexit and the EU. There are two sides to the problem. There's the political one, or the ideological one, that is within the EU government itself, that it should have such a united Europe, which includes the capture of Britain within that union. And then there's the commercial one, considering what is the financial gains or losses involved in the splitting of Britain from the union. Now, common sense tells you that if the EU takes a punitive role towards Britain in saying you cannot have access to our markets for your goods, and Britain says, well, we will not allow access to our markets for the goods produced in Europe. Both sides are impoverished. Greece is impoverished. Everywhere is impoverished that sells goods, foods, or produce into Britain, which is one of the fifth largest market in the world. Now, if you're going to destroy the fifth largest market in the world, then you create an economic collapse throughout much of the world. So, when it comes to dealing with Brexit, I for one, I have not read any of the ideas and the laws and what's been denied in Parliament in Britain to understand the legalities of it. But I do understand this. Now, I understand the fear the EU has that if Britain leaves and is successful, then other European countries might also say, well, look, they're leaving, they've left and they're successful, and if we leave, we can be successful and no longer dominated by an oligarchy that thinks it can tell us how to think and speak and what we can talk and learn about. It's basic economics that's run the world, the commercial world, for 100 years, a couple of 100 years or so, that must in the end dominate the thinking of the people within Europe themselves, with the European nations, in the fact it is their economy that is under threat by any punitive measures within the EU against Britain, not the EU leaders themselves, which are extremely rich cartel. It will not affect them how impoverished the people of Greece become, or Italy, or Slovenia, or any other place in Europe. No matter how impoverished they become, it will not affect the oligarchy that now runs Europe. And this is a problem when you have an anti-democratic society running any institution or any nations. Once you have this oligarchy, it becomes empirical and it wants to dictate to the rest of the people how they should be. Now, and that's why the EU must fail anyway, eventually, because it's not democratic and it's preventing the people having free will. By prevention of free will, in the end, ultimately always causes sort of social catastrophe. Have we seen over the centuries where, or last century at least, where the idea of collectivism, which is the European EU, is about a collective mindset, always eventually causes revolution against it, and it causes massive problems within that system itself, by the idea of one people rebelling against the idea of being told what to do by some hierarchy that then thinks it's an authority over the rest of them. And that will always cause a split and always cause a problem. And Europe is probably heading towards an internal war within itself because of the EU. In spite of the EU's idea that it's going to unify all of Europe, eventually its own means of thinking, which is not democratic, an authoritarian will eventually destroy the idea of a European Union anyway. So, to be punitive in actions against Britain, which voted democratically for its freedom from the EU, means that the EU itself is not an economic bloc, but a political bloc. And it does not understand, it may understand commercial aspirations of the people and businesses, of course, but then it's putting its political motivations and beliefs ahead of that. How it can go from here should depend on the will of the British people and the common sense amongst all European people in a democratic sense, and not the leaders of the EU themselves, who should be servants of the people, not masters over them. And that's one of the problems is that certain people in this world don't like the idea of having masters over them. And because the EU have taken this master-serf approach to the European community itself, like they're elite superior people over the rest of society, that's why the age-old problem of the people rising up and rebelling against that in one form or the other, whether it's a Bolshevik revolution or Nazism going against the treaties was involved in the First World War. It's the constant theme is that people demand for their own determination in the end, even though it may not work out right for them in the eventuality over the generations. And I suspect that's what's the problem in the EU is. And maybe I don't know. Maybe I don't know what the original motivations were of the people who wanted to create a common market and all that. But after 3 generations or more of this oligarchy having entrenched in power, has impoverished its ability to think laterally and compassionately, because it's become soulless towards the people of Britain that voted for an exit from this being captured by the EU. And it's because of that particular problem now it's become a soulless corporate entity, that it no longer acts in as human manner as it maybe ought to, and therefore it doesn't see the need, it's going against the commercial interests of the people of Europe by maybe trying to make it difficult for the people of Britain, and think, oh, we'll punish people of Britain by, you'll all be poor. If you leave the EU, you're all going to be poor. And by impoverishing Britain, you impoverish the rest of Europe. So the best way to do a Brexit is to let Britain make its own laws and allow it to stay within the common market. Now, obviously, if it's about the goodness, if the EU oligarchy are for the goodness of human beings, and not just themselves, and promoting their own ideology, then it would say, okay, you're free, you make your own laws up, you do what you like, you're British, we respect you being British, we should respect Italians being Italian, etc. We respect human differences, we're supposed to respect Islamic differences to us, and yet the differences we are from each other is no longer respected. And there is a contradiction and hypocrisy within the EU itself. Respect the differences, and I say to the British people, we respect your democratic decision. We also must respect the need to keep the commerce flowing, the trade flowing, and all of that between all of Europe. Don't do any interruption whatsoever towards that would be the best way of doing a Brexit, because that way is less threatening to all the other nations that might be thinking the threat of the overlords that are the EU is getting to be rather troublesome in the individual minds of Italians and Greeks or anyone else might be thinking, hang on a minute, we've had these dictatorships before and they always led in a disaster. So let the British people be free and let just continue a common market as before. It's so simple. It's not complicated. They're making something that ought to be relatively simple extremely complicated, because they're confusing their political ideology with the commercial reality a modern society depends upon to create its economy. Because without that free flowing of goods and services and everything, you kill off the economy and therefore you destroy the social structure itself. Is that what the EU wants? It needs to ask itself, what does it really want? Make up its mind. The benefit of the people and humans, or it is against the humans involved in the human world? That is the question it needs to ask itself.